Mr. Oakhurst did not drink alcohol. It got it in the way of a profession which required a cool head, blank face, and quick thinking. He stared at his sleepy fellow outcasts. Suddenly, for the first time, the lack of company from his lonely trade, his habits of life, and his faults made him unhappy. He kept himself busy by removing the dust from his black clothes, washing his face and hands, and doing all the other usual actions characteristic of his neat habits. For a short time, he forgot his unhappy thoughts. The idea of leaving his weaker and less able fellow travelers probably never occurred to Mr. Oakhurst, yet he could not help feeling the need for some excitement. Strangely enough, it was danger that produced that calm appearance for which he was known. He looked at the steep rocks that rose 1,000 feet above the ring of pine trees around him. He watched the dark clouds in the sky and saw the valley below, already becoming covered in shadow. Suddenly, he heard his own name called. A horse and man slowly climbed the track. Mr. Oakhurst recognized the young face of Tom Simpson, otherwise known as the Innocent of Sandy Bar. He had met him some months before at a poker game. Using presence of mind, he had won about $40 from that innocent youth. After the game was finished, Mr. Oakhurst spoke to the young gambler softly behind the door and said, "Tommy, you're a good little man, but you're no gambler. Don't ever try it again." He then handed him his money back and pushed him gently from the room, and thus made himself a devoted friend of Tom Simpson. Tommy greeted Mr. Oakhurst in his fresh and enthusiastic way. "I had started," he said, "to go to Poker Flat to seek my fortune." "Alone?" "No, not exactly alone," he said, laughing. In fact, he had run away with Piney Woods. Didn't Mr. Oakhurst remember Piney? She was the girl that used to wait on the tables at the Temperance House. They had been engaged a long time, but old Jake Woods had objected, and so they had run away. They were going to Poker Flat to be married, and here they were. And they were tired out. And how lucky it was they had found company and a place to camp. "All this," the Innocent said quickly, while Piney, a fat, pretty girl of 15, rode out from behind the pine tree where she had been hiding with embarrassment. She stood next to the two men. Mr. Oakhurst seldom troubled himself with emotion, still less with proper behavior, but he felt that this was not a good situation. However, he kept his presence of mind sufficiently to kick Uncle Bill, who was about to say something. Despite the alcohol, Uncle Bill was aware of what the kick meant and that he had better take notice of Mr. Oakhurst. He then tried to encourage Tom Simon to ride on, and even pointed out that there were no plans for or means of making a camp. But that didn't help, as the Innocent met this comment by assuring the party that he was provided with an extra animal loaded with food. Also, he had discovered a rough wooden hut near the track. "Piney can stay with Mr. Oakhurst," said the Innocent, pointing to the Duchess. "And I can look after myself." Nothing but Mr. Oakhurst's kicking foot saved Uncle Billy from bursting into a shout of laughter. As it was, he had to go farther up the canyon until he could control his delight. There he told the joke to the tall pine trees, hitting on the side of his leg with his hand and pulling faces and swearing in his usual way. When he returned to the group, he found them seated by a fire in an apparently friendly conversation. The air had grown strangely cold, and the sky was dark. Piney was talking in her young, enthusiastic way to the Duchess, who was listening with interest and excitement she had not shown for many days. The Innocent was talking, obviously with equal effect, to Mr. Oakhurst and Mother Shipton, who was actually becoming quite friendly. "Do you think you're on a picnic?" asked Uncle Billy, with disgust as he looked over the happy group, the dancing flames, and the animals tied up nearby. Suddenly, an idea mixed with the alcohol affected his brain. It was apparently of a funny nature, for he felt the need to hit his leg again and push his hand into his mouth. As the shadows moved slowly up the mountain, a slight wind blew through the tops of the pine trees and whistled through the long rows of branches. The ruined hut, repaired, and Piney said good night. They exchanged a kiss, so honest and sincere that it could have been heard above the whistling trees. The weak Duchess and the unfriendly Mother Shipton were probably too surprised to remark upon this last simple action, and so, without a word, went into the hut. More wood was put on the fire, the men lay down in front of the door, and in a few minutes everyone was asleep. Mr. Oakhurst slept lightly. Toward morning, he woke up stiff and cold. As he stirred the fire, the wind, which had now gathered strength, blew something on his cheek which filled him with fear. Snow. He stood up with the intention of waking the others, for there was no time to lose. Turning to where Uncle Billy had been lying, he found he had gone. He was immediately suspicious and said a few words under his breath. He ran to the spot where the animals had been tied, but they were no longer there. The tracks were already disappearing quickly in the snow.